Welcome everyone to the CoSA member webinar. I think we'll go ahead and get started. So today's presentation is going to be a kind of a recap of what did we have at the annual meeting that was just recently in Washington, D.C. For some of you, that's going to be a review because you were actually there. For many of you, this is going to be a, hey, I couldn't be there in person, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about what happened. So with that, so we'll have a chance to discuss all of that. Then there's going to be plenty of time for questions and answers. And those of you who did attend, we're going to encourage you to raise your hand and unmute and maybe share some of your observations as well. So with that, let's go on. And today's presenters are going to be Jamie Awalt, our CoSA president, Joy Banks, our executive director for CoSA, and Josh Hager, who's the records description unit supervisor for the North Carolina Division of Archives and Records. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Jamie and Joy and Josh. Take it away, guys.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Awalt. It's, I would say nice to see everyone, but I can't see any of you on my screen, but I'm assuming there's a lot of you there. So thank you for being here. And I enjoyed the annual meeting immensely. It was really great to see colleagues. As you all know, we hosted, Tennessee hosted the Best Practices Exchange in CoSA annual meeting in September, so not quite a year ago of 2022. And so I joked that it felt a little like a wedding. I know I was there and I ran around a lot and I talked to people, but I don't remember a whole lot about that annual meeting. So it was good to attend as a participant. That being said, I never got to an SAA session, but I don't feel slighted because there were a great deal of activities and discussions and great conversations that were being had amongst CoSA members. And we kicked off with, I participated in Archives in the Hill with several other colleagues on that Tuesday morning. That was my first time ever doing an event like that. I was pretty nervous, I'm not going to lie, going in. I didn't know what to expect. And had some difficult meetings. I anticipated some difficult conversations, or maybe not difficult, but some challenging conversations with my own senators, Marsha Blackburn and Bill Hagerty. I was partnered with archivists from Pennsylvania, no state archivists, I think 2 university archivists. And it was a really amazing experience. I think that the planning and coordination of it, Joy, everyone, what you did to make that such a coordinated effort, it was something that I'm glad that I participated in, and I hope to do more so in the future. And the conversations that I had with particularly Bill Hagerty's office was really positive. And it's, I think for me, going in and connecting, just keeping that local connection really helped as well, to talk about big national issues. So that was great. The evening was then kicked off with the CoSA welcoming reception hosted at the Wilson Building by Lopez Matthews and his colleagues and staff at the DC Archives, including the DC Secretary of State was there. And it also felt very celebratory, if you will. It was a great, I think, way to kind of end that long day of meetings on the Hill, and to really see the support and the enthusiasm and the excitement around what Lopez and his colleagues are doing there in DC, and the support that he has from the Secretary of State. I really, really enjoyed it. Of course, seeing all of our colleagues was great too, but it kind of carried that spirit of advocacy and celebration, if you will, and to kick off our meeting. So great job to Lopez for his hard work there. We started the working session started with lunch on Wednesday, and I'm trying to get my dates right, the 26th. The lunch was hosted by or sponsored by Ancestry. And of course, as we normally do, we had time for presentations from our sponsors at the start of the working session. Ancestry talked a lot about their AI work, and Carl Carter from newspapers.com also spoke about using AI to index obituaries and digitized newspapers. I wrote down a number that they have extracted 1 billion names so far. So it's a nice little number there. And then we moved right into the program. Ken Williams introduced everyone. I think it was a really great turnout. I don't know what the final numbers were for attendance. I know that number, but I don't have it in my head. But it was a very full room, I can say, filled with a lot of voices. We had 3 kind of topics or focus areas for the working session, starting with a focus on CoSA. And Steve Murray, our treasurer, provided a really detailed summary of the case for sustainability document that was drafted and implemented, I think, 2016, covering through 2020. And then started a discussion talking about funder support and our dues structures, what our membership means, putting kind of a price or a number on CoSA as a member and as an organization, and what comes from that. And we broke out into small groups and talked about the proposal, which I believe everybody has received a copy of, for a dues restructuring and increase. Generated, as you can imagine, a great deal of discussion. I think I have maybe 10 or so pages of notes about that. I'll say that one thing that I heard over and over again at my table was talking about CoSA as a community of support. And so putting what you get from the organization as just having a community is really important. We talked about all of the challenges and the various, I guess, pains that would come with changing the due structure. You know, a lot of us are on a budgetary cycle that does not really give much flexibility year to year. And so I think it was a really great discussion. I'll leave it there if Joy, Josh, or any member here who was at the meeting wants to speak up on that. The next topic was on digital records, digitization. We had several NARA representatives, staff members there. Of course, Meg Phillips was in attendance and participated in the discussion, which I really appreciated. I appreciated having different folks there and hearing from their perspective. I did not have as many people at my table, but again, I'll open it up for people to talk about what the discussion took place on their area. And then the final kind of discussion topic was archives in the post-pandemic landscape. We were just joking kind of before this. I don't remember too much about that discussion until Josh prompted my memory. And one thing that we really talked about is how we're doing more and in terms of coming back after the pandemic, and how a lot of the state archives really increased their work in terms of, I'll say, for reference services, almost overcompensating, of course, folks that could not come into and use our collections in our repositories. And so doing a lot of really in-depth research and legwork for patrons. And then how do we scale that back to a realistic area? And then, as Josh said too, how do we report that? What does that look like in reporting? You know, not every reference question is the same. And so how do we express that to our funders and our statistics to account for the number of staff hours and time that's going in to kind of this new research area? I'll just continue on, and then we can focus back around, I guess, Joy, unless you want to stop here and ask for discussion. So the business meeting the next day, pretty full agenda again. We had our call to order and went through, we had different vendor spotlights, both Ancestry, Preservica, Apex spoke with us, Family Search. And I think what's stood out to me, the award ceremony is always, I think, a great celebration for our business meeting. Tom Roller, who our colleague recently retired, although he sounds really busy. I don't know how retired Tom actually is, because I keep hearing people putting his names on things on work to do. But Tom Roller receiving the CoSA Lifetime Achievement Award was really, really great. And Tom, in true spirit, gave a very, I thought, rousing acceptance speech on the value of what we do, and to remember how important our work is, and to continue to push forward with our missions and what we do. So overall, I thought it was a really, really great meeting. Of course, there were other awards given out as well. I think we had a total of, I'm trying to count here, maybe 15 or so awards.
Yeah, I think it was 13, like 13 or 15. And everybody who received an award was there. Well, I think everybody but one was there. And that was really exciting. That doesn't happen often.
Yeah. So that was really great. And of course, we ended after that, I think, looking forward again, talking from this meeting about CoSA as an organization, and kind of the key things that are on our minds moving through this next year are sustainability, as well as our meeting, and how we continue our programs, and what we want our meeting structure to look like as a group. Meeting as a solo organization, which has not happened in years. I think I heard yesterday the last was in New Mexico, maybe a decade or so ago. And so looking at different models for what the meeting will look like, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more here later. Joy's going to talk about that, but there are some different models and options out there that would work for us. I think what I heard a lot in consensus is that having more time together, maybe not in terms of number of days, but maximizing our time at a working session in a little different way, so that things don't feel quite as rushed. I mean, our working session is really a pretty short period, an afternoon. And so how we can come together in a meaningful way and allow for greater discussions, presentations, and kind of problem solving on how we do that. So I have talked a lot, rambled a lot here. Josh, I'll let you kind of jump in on your experience. And
sure, thanks, Jamie. So I'm here representing the staff perspective. I am not a director. For those of you who aren't aware on the call, the distinction is that everybody who works in the state archives or territorial archives is a member of CoSA, but only the directors are the voting members. So that's the distinction. But I think it's important for those of us who aren't directors but are still staff to be involved and to use this community. As Jamie was saying, it's a really important community for working with each other. And it's a community that is more affordable. All of us are on state salary. And the SAA fees are quite high. CoSA doesn't have that for staff. But also the issues are similar from institution to institution. We're dealing with the same sort of budget constraints. We're dealing with public records law, other similarities. So having that community where we can talk is really important. So I think going to these meetings is really great as a networking opportunity. I certainly in the past couple of conferences made connections, lasting connections already that we're working on at the conference and then throughout the year. I know a lot of the names that are people who are here. I'm really involved with the State Electronic Records Initiative. I am the co-chair for the Advocacy Group for SERI with Catherine Giles, who I believe is here from Kentucky. And the previous chairs have been helpful. There's hello, Catherine in the chat. Alan Ramsey is the current chair of the steering committee for SERI. He's here. So it's great to have this Josh Hackle, who's the chair of tools and resources, is here. So SERI is very well represented in this conversation. But of course, my day job isn't just electronic records. So having these connections at the conference and seeing all these different issues that Jamie was talking about, you know, the expanded reference, doing more with less, you know, we're doing more duties in the post-pandemic world. I think all of us are dealing with, there's probably, I would guess most of us have at least a few positions that are vacant right now or have been over the past year with transitions. And so you're doing more, we expanded our scope of what we were doing when we were working from home. We're now doing those duties as well as the duties we were doing before the pandemic in person. And we're doing other people's duties because of gaps in staff, whether those are because of retirements or resignations or just budget cuts. We're still filling those in. So we're all overworked. And I think, how can CoSA help all of us in that? I mean, we can't be the solution for burnout. That's not, I mean, we can help each other, you know, kvetch with each other, but we can also help each other with productive solutions. And there may be some problems that other states have already thought about and have solutions for, which is the same impetus we had for STEER, which was the unconference we had back in May that was SERI specific. And at the conference, I was able to talk to a lot of folks who did attend STEER, and they said they really liked having that unconference, which I think informs what Jamie was saying. We like talking to each other about productive solutions, and having a conference later or having another meeting later that is more focused on us as CoSA members talking to each other about these various problems and coming up with, well, there might be a solution in the resource center. There might be something that some other state and territory has already done. Let's try to implement that. Will be really useful, I think. It's very similar to what the Southeastern Archives Regional Consortium does in SARC, to what we did in STEER back in May, what we do at the working session. And I think that's a good model for how we can work together. But this, of course, wasn't just the CoSA conference. It was also SAA. So I was able to stay for the entirety of the SAA conference. There were a couple sessions that stood out to me that were quite interesting. The first one I want to point out that I found quite interesting is one that features a lot of CoSA members, and it was called Removing the Stigma, Opening Mental Health Records for Public Access. And in that session, we heard from Alan Ramsey from Connecticut, Karen Gray from Alaska, Kate McBrien from Maine, Lizette Pelletier from Connecticut, and Chandler Lightly from Indiana. Alan is on the call, so I don't want to steal too much thunder, but I will say that those people were all talking about the restrictions around mental health records that have either come up through law or through case litigation in their states, and how they're having to overcome a lot of challenges. It varies a lot from state to state and territory to territory. I certainly spoke to a couple of those folks afterward about, you know, how North Carolina differs from other states, how we just got a sunshine law in place for prison. Mental health is 100 years here, but there's some exceptions. Literally everywhere is a little bit different in how judges interpret the law. I was really interested to hear, I believe it was Connecticut, Alan and Lizette, who told us that a judge had interpreted HIPAA for a patient to end at death, but the patient's family has HIPAA protections in perpetuity, which is something that I had not heard before. And that certainly puts a wrinkle in accessing records relating to mental health, especially when that's one of the things a lot of researchers most want to see. I've heard from Alan there could be future work from that group working together to continue their conversation, maybe bringing in other states and territories, maybe doing other kinds of ways to showcase the work. So I'm looking forward to hearing from that. And of course, it was an entirely CoSA session. There was SAA folks there, but it was all CoSA folks on the panel. So I found that session really great. Another session I wanted to highlight that I found really useful was called We Are Not Okay, Responding to Archival Violence and Archivist Pain. This was from Camilla Tesler from Yale, Thea Topak, Eric Hung from the Museum of Asian American Research Center, or Music of Asian America Research Center, Jessica Ballard from Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and Taylor Walford from NC State. And this session was talking about, or the people in this session discussed the archival trauma that comes upon the archivist doing archival processing or doing reference work and research on records that can cause emotional trauma. Camilla, for example, was talking about how it's been difficult for her as a Jewish American to deal with manuscript collections that discuss the Holocaust and the emotional trauma of that. Taylor at NC State, that one of their areas of focus is animal rights. And she's had to process a lot of collections from animal rights groups that contain very violent imagery and vivisections and other things like that. And it's really tough. And she also supervises students who do that work as part of their internships with the Special Collections Research Center, NC State. I think there's more work that needs to be done on archival trauma. And when I came back from SAA, I asked my staff, have you experienced this? And I had one staff member tell me, I have, but I didn't know that's what it was called. She is our governor's records archivist. She's also African-American, and a lot of the things in the governor's papers she's been working with lately have involved the Klan from the early 20th century. And it's been difficult. And she was like, I didn't know that's what it was called. But yeah, it's been tough. Another one of my staff members said, yeah, I mean, seeing some of these things relating to the treatment of enslaved children makes me think about my children and, how they would have been treated, and it's tough. So I think our staffs, especially in description, but in other units as well, would benefit from thinking about this, knowing that while our work is incredibly important, it's not worth going into that deep, dark emotional hole, that you can pull out of it for a few minutes, get some perspective, talk to other staff, talk to other people in other states and territories about similar kinds of collections, because there are things that we have uniquely as government archives that are going to be, for lack of a better word, more egregious than in other places because of the nature of government records. So I think keeping that in mind, notice there wasn't anyone from CoSA on that panel. And maybe that's an area where a future session like a BPE could be government archivists talking about trauma, and not maybe just for our staff, but also doing content warnings and contextual notes for researchers for how to prepare for trauma when dealing with some of these very difficult collections and subjects. I also wanted to point out that a couple other sessions were quite interesting, and I found them very thought-provoking, but they were giving some advice that I didn't think I could implement directly here. One, for example, was called The Politics of Records Management, which was a very highly attended session. And it was very interesting. And I think that the intentions of the people on that panel are strong, but they were coming from a place not of government archives, or certainly not of state and territorial archives, where our record schedules and our policies on records management have to fit inside the context of our public records laws or FOIA or whatever the case may be for your state or territory. And also within things like HIPAA and FERPA and other state and federal laws. So we can try to strive toward a more social justice conscious records retention schedule, but we also have to comply with the law. And I think that was not a factor for some of those for that panel. And maybe that's a conversation that we have as members of CoSA with members of the archival profession more broadly about how do we apply some of these things in our context where constrained is the wrong word, but we're certainly more defined, narrowly defined as to what we can and can't do. Another session that I found interesting for similar reasons, on the Saturday, there was, or one on Saturday, or and then one on Friday, they go sort of together. The second plenary was very much about social justice. We actually got to hear from the new president of ALA, Emily Drabinski. Her election is sort of the catalyst for a lot of states leaving ALA because she describes herself as a Marxist lesbian. And while I think I speak for myself that it's sad people are leaving ALA for a political reason, it's the openness about politics and about, a certain kind of political viewpoint is a bit different than what we can do with our stakeholders. The very first question in that plenary was, how can we as archivists fight fascism? An interesting topic for conversation, but we can't just go out and tell our political leaders that make our budgets and that who we report to that we have a political view like that. My director in North Carolina has a saying that we are, strongly nonpartisan. We serve the people of the state, and we aren't paid to have a political opinion. I can have that outside my building, but while I'm in this spot, I'm a servant for the people of North Carolina. And again, it's a bit different. Similarly, there was a session on Saturday about Portland, Oregon, and recent activism in Portland, where activists from the Don't Shoot Portland group have been creating art installations using public records to highlight racism and violence and things that need to be changed in the city of Portland. And again, in that session, I found it very thought-provoking, very emotional, but also things that are like, how can we be involved in this work within the constraints of what we can do? And I don't have an answer to that. And in fact, one of the panelists said, the fact we're having this session, I'm upset with all of you for having this session because it means I have to highlight my own self-worth. And my reaction to that was, I don't think any of us disagrees with the mission or even with the significance. It's how do we make this something that we can do on a day-to-day basis? So that was the sessions that I found quite interesting. And I encourage staff to be involved with future CoSA meetings, whether you can attend in person or other ways. Certainly be involved with other CoSA initiatives like SERI and STEER and things like this, where we can do it remotely, where there's not as much of a cost. But yeah, I found it very enlightening, a very great trip. I enjoyed being there and being with a lot of folks. And a couple of us did continue our tradition that we started at BPE in Nashville, where we played team trivia one night. We got second in Nashville. We did horribly in DC. So maybe next year we can redeem ourselves. But if you're interested, let me know and you can join our staff CoSA trivia team for 2024. There, I see Grant in the chat. Yes, we got obliterated. It was a lot of fun, but we got obliterated. And on that fun note, I'll pass it over to Joy.
Thanks, Josh. Yes, I was glad to hear that y'all went out for trivia. And I don't know, maybe that means that we need to have like trivia in the in-between times and practice a little bit so that we can just dominate in the next city. I really appreciated hearing all these reflections. I'm with Jamie. My experience at this meeting hosting it meant that whenever I walked somewhere, I never got to where I was going. But I think that that is part of the beauty of these in-person meetings, is the hallway interactions and the running into the people and experiences that were not on the agenda and as part of your expectations. And part of what I want to reflect on is the as our plan for next year. As part of all of this, we were evaluating our historical combination of our meetings with other associations. This meeting with SAA was our last contractual arrangement that we had from pre-pandemic times. So it seemed that given that opportunity, it was a nice time that we can start planning for 2024 and a meeting that will be CoSA. This is a CoSA meeting, not a CoSA joint meeting. The board had the chance to meet yesterday, and we have prioritized some dates and locations based on the conversations that happened in DC. We will be preferencing a meeting in the fall. That has come through quite a lot of conversations, just trying to find a time that is better in terms of legislative sessions, and all of the other things that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And we presented 3 different locations while we were in DC. And I think at this point, we are ranking them to be St. Louis, Sacramento, or Salt Lake City. We have some conversations that are going to happen just to see the feasibility of those options. The most important of which is getting in touch with our territorial members, because while we were at the meeting in DC, we received news from the IMLS that our 2-year grant was funded to really dive deep into the needs and struggles that our territorial and non-contiguous state members are facing. And as part of that grant, our 2024 meeting will support their travel to our meeting location, wherever that may be. So we're trying to preference a location that is one that will be most beneficial to them and is also cost conscious of travel from such remote locations. So that's why we're ranking St. Louis first at this point, and we'll do some investigations just about the feasibility of that. I think that Josh's reflections offered a really good pro-con list of why we've been meeting together with other associations, and also why it will be beneficial to meet alone. And next year, whatever the structure of this meeting takes, our hope is that we will create a dynamic environment for the full breadth of the CoSA community to gather together and talk about the things that matter most to them. I feel like we need to do that as a group. It's been a long time, as Jamie said, that we've been able to have that space alone. And it might be after we do this, we decide that we really do want to kind of be intentional about the joint meetings that we would have moving forward. Everything is on the table right now. And I think that we've received some really good feedback from the attendee survey that we pushed out to folks who were in person. I will extend this invitation now to anyone who was not there. If you have thoughts and opinions and reflections about our meeting in 2024, a favorite model of conferencing that you have, things that are a priority to you, and also the barriers to attending that might come up. We are really interested in hearing that from everybody that we can. So if you want to email me or Jamie or any of the other board members, feel free to do that. If you'd like to take the survey as a mechanism to fill out things, I can also make sure you get the link for that. I don't know that I have a whole lot of other things to add. I kind of was saving my thoughts for the end based on what Jamie and Josh talked about. I put in the numbers that we have from the meeting. So we had 38 member institutions represented, and between the two different events, we had just over 63 that I counted, and that's based on people writing their names on the piece of paper at the table. And I'm fairly certain not everybody followed the instructions. So I think that that is undercounting our attendees, and we'll get better at that next year. Maybe I'll have to make you sign the paper before you walk through the door instead of waiting until you all start talking to each other. But I think at this point, we'll kind of open things up. If you have specific questions, if there is anybody who was there and wants to add anything to the reflections that Jamie and Josh shared. We are recording this, so I know that there are others who were interested in listening to this later, especially if there was a particular theme or anything like that. And I saw that John Dugan's asking what categories we need help on with trivia. So I think if we come up with a specific plan, I think that we can be successful in this endeavor.
Well, I neglected to mention, I responded to him in the chat, but a lot of it was contemporary music. So if anyone is fans of contemporary music, we did not know basically all the songs that Barack Obama picked for his 2023 summer playlist and the artist. They gave us like the song, we didn't know the artist, so it was quite difficult. That
seems very DC specific. Like
he's much more hip than us. But I didn't mention that the most poignant moment of the entire week when Jamie received the cape. If you haven't been there in person to see this most illustrious moment, you must see it. It is truly transcendental.
It is. I wear it every day in private.
You should have worn it today, Jamie.
I should have.
Have on your presidential cape of power, which I'm gonna have to insist that in the next year we actually write a provenance for this, so that as good archivists we have the history of this artifact that is,
which we then add to the CoSA record stored in our building.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what Jamie adds to the cape of power.
I've got a year to think about my button. I've got some ideas. Dolly Parton.
We have Elaine who has her hand raised, and there's a question in chat.
Okay, well, I'll do, Michelle is asking about hybrid, in-person, virtual models. Yes, having a virtual model makes things not only more complicated, but much more expensive. And we were able to do more when we were in Tennessee because of the fact that we were at Jamie's archive and we didn't have additional expenses from their tech support that they provided. I think looking ahead to next year, we will do our best to investigate our options right now, not knowing kind of like the venue that we'll be at. If we're at a hotel, it tends to be quite a bit more expensive to try to facilitate something like that. But we also have to bear in mind that some of these, especially like the small group conversations, are difficult to translate into a virtual environment. So I don't know, we'll try to be creative and engage, because we do know that travel will be impossible no matter what to the folks that we would like to engage.
Not to make a plug for Nashville again in the immediate future. We do have free soft conferencing available though here in the building, so we could do something. I don't know if other states could do the same. And I really enjoyed meeting at a state archive, even if it was my own.
So there's a reverse to the hybrid challenge. There were a few sessions that were only virtual. And for those of us who were in person, getting our computers to work
It
in either
was,
the room or the conference area was very difficult. I was 10 minutes late for the session on the backer grant because it was entirely online, and my computer was having so much trouble getting into the session with the Wi-Fi. So I think, the hybrid sessions were fine for us. We could just walk into the room, but it was one of those like unexpected things you don't think about, that maybe the in-person folks can't get in as easily for that session. And hats off to Nick and Kate for doing a great job in that session, especially since they were still there in person. And
Yeah, they
pulled
were
it
both
off.
in their hotel rooms
Yeah, they pulled
doing
it
the
off
session
great.
virtually.
It was a great session, but I didn't mention that one because I think because it was mostly virtual, I think everyone who's here who wanted to attend probably could have. But great session, but the logistics were tough.
Elaine, are you unmuted? Are you ready for your
I am
comment?
unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I just
we
want to
can.
add
Thank
my
you.
chorus of thanks. I participated for the first time in Archives on the Hill, and we had two state archivists, myself and Tim, retired state archivist, and then Diana Marsh from University of Maryland. And we had really great meetings, and we had a pretty friendly representatives. We did make a cold call on one of our less friendly representatives and at least left information in the office. So we felt good about that. But that was a really excellent day. And then I attended the working session, and I just want to put in a plug for what a positive development it is that CoSA now includes staff because of our geographic closeness to Washington. I was able to have Assistant State Archivist Corey Lewis there, our head of reference, our transfer archivist, and that CoSA working session where we could all be at different tables was so valuable. And it just reminded me because I remember the days when CoSA was only state archivists and sort of how difficult that transition. Well, it was a transition for the organization, and I just think it's so positive. And I wasn't able to stay any longer than that first day just because of obligations here, but the rest of the staff did. And so it just, it really was a good experience, and that working session was excellent. So I want to give a shout out to CoSA. That was a good move. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. I think that it is proving to be a way that CoSA is moving forward to our strategic plan, especially regarding the sustainability of the field more generally. It's engaging everyone earlier to encourage longevity within public service and government archiving, and having these conversations and having everyone meet and get to network and be together is part of that. Because if you shift between states, or as you move up in the field, you just continue to have those relationships with people throughout the community. So thanks, Elaine. It was good. I mean, my vision that's starting just to form for next year is really just the working session longer and bigger and finding all of the different ways that we can make tables of people together. So not just the type of work that you might do, but thinking through topics that you might want to discuss, and just trying to get all of us talking to each other in really dynamic ways, so that by the end, we're walking away with actionable ideas, collaborations, connections, and you're really going back into your institutions to do something, to enact change, to try something new. So I think the working session was just long enough to start to get the creative juices flowing. And if we could have just like skipped out on everything else and done another day, it would have been more productive, I think.
An idea to build off that, Joy, I think, if you want to include a way for people to present on their work, it might not be a bad idea to have look for okay, we want someone to talk about a project they've done with records management or in description or in digital, then sort of put out a call, but have it as the beginning of the discussion on that topic. So like, if we're going to have 2 hours talking about, conscious reparative description, the first 15 minutes is somebody from a state or territory talking about what they've done there to sort of set the stage for the discussion and inspire. And that way they can be it's slightly more structured than just an open discussion. And it gives folks a chance, because I know from a staff point of view, it might be easier for staff to justify getting funding to go if they're presenting and not just
Right.
talking. So that would give us a chance to do that, and to update on our work, but then have most of it as the open discussion. But just an idea. I mean, I don't think everything requires that, but there certainly could still be a way for that to happen.
I love that idea, Josh. And of course, North Carolina, Tennessee, we're SARC states, Southeastern Archives Records Conference, and that fits very similar within that model of combination of open dialogue and kind of free-flowing conversation with structure, with with some defined talking points, if you will, or conversation starters, whatever you may call those, in the presentation part of that, even if it's having kind of leaders for each topic from different archives to provide their perspectives to help keep that conversation going outside of just a volunteer at the table would be really great. And having the perspective of a combination of, staff members as well as state archivist members from our organization, leading those and facilitating those conversations, I think could be really interesting.
And something else that came up with the staff that they would like to see at another conference is, having the ability to work and talk to the vendors more in depth. We had the exhibit hall, but a lot of the working groups at SAA were focused on the SAA concerns. So having the equivalent of that from the vendors. So like in vendor presentations, like having it be including for people who are already using the tool, so they can come together, like all of us who are on Apex, for example, could have a talk when we come together to talk about it. But then there could also be a separate time when people who are considering that vendor could go to it. And so I think making the vendor relationships, because again, I'm not in a position where I can make a decision about what I'm going to purchase. But given that I'm an Apex state, I want to hear from other Apex states and territories about our challenges and our concerns. And I'm sure the Preservica group would do the same, and other kinds of, and maybe it doesn't even have to be a vendor that's there. It might be a product or some kind of thing that certain states and territories are using, that we could be like, okay, all of you are using, archive space, or, fill in the blank. Let's talk. Let's have basically a birds of a feather on this. There could be potential there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we will be enacting, I guess, for this coming meeting is a larger working group for planning this next meeting. We've always had CoSA representatives on the larger organizations, program planning and local event planning groups. But since we'll be doing this one all by ourselves, it's just me and our wonderful contractors who are all part-time. And so to make this really be a gathering of highest value to all of you, we'll probably be looking for maybe like 9 or so people who will take ownership of the shape and feel of what this might look like, with guidance from the CoSA team. And we're not going to like hang you out to dry or anything. But I don't know what topics you all want to talk about, and I don't know the priorities that you're going to be facing a year from now, and nobody really does. I don't know if you want to do if you want to eat together or things like that. So these are the kind of things that we'll be looking for, and we'll put out a call for that volunteer opportunity over the next few months or so, probably.
Joy, I see in the chat, John Dugan has a question for you about effective proposal near the St. Louis airport.
Yeah, and so John, I know too, you've pointed out the convenience to the NARA facilities, and that is one of the primary draws for St. Louis in particular, especially with a focus on the territories. If we can really maximize their time and face time with NARA colleagues, and Dr. Shogun, the Otis, has asked us to let her know whenever we're going to meet again next year. So it seems more likely that she might be able to come and spend a length of time with us if we're somewhere where there's a NARA facility. And yes, I will be exploring all of our options in St. Louis. I think that I'll be calling you, and I also have a lot of local connections there that have functions and facilities in town. And the benefit of that, we had little like bonus ideas for each of the potential locations. And at this point, what we're thinking about is a side trip that we would go up to Springfield, Illinois. And Jeff, if my husband Jeff was at our meeting, if you didn't have a chance to meet him, he's a corporate travel agent. He's already dreaming of like getting us an entire car on Amtrak so that we can take the ride up to Springfield. So, big things coming out for 2024. Yes, toasted ravioli for sure. We would definitely have to have that on our menus at some point. Oh yeah, Jim. Yes, and I'm glad you're here, Jim. I owe you all an email that I was drafting before coming into this. And so I am very interested in hearing your actual feedback. We had looked at Sacramento as a potential location, but it is interesting to see your note about many of the archives being in San Francisco. So. Yes, and Natalia, I owe you an email too. I have been trying to, I felt like leading up to the meeting, everything was the meeting, and now it's all of the things that were on the to-do list that got pushed until after the meeting. So yes, I have a lot of follow-up to do. I just think it's been really exciting to dream about this, and I'm glad to see that all of you are excited about the potential that we have. It's kind of weird to be in somebody else's space as a group. And I've noticed that these last 2 years. And so you all must have been noticing it for much longer than that. And I'm really hopeful that this can be a dynamic experience for everybody. Does anybody else have questions or want to make comments on the record?
One other thing I should note, we mentioned this at the annual meeting, but for those of you who weren't there, the series subcommittees are still looking for members. So if you or your staff are interested in joining, we have the subcommittees on advocacy and outreach. We have the subcommittee on tools and resources and the subcommittee for education. Please reach out to Joy or to me. I can get you in touch, or to Alan as the director for SERI, or the head of steering committee. So just reach out to us. We can get you in contact with the right folks. They're also on the CoSA website. It's a really great way to network for staff. Catherine and I would love to have you. I'd love to have your staff, but if you join any of them, we'd encourage you to do so as a way to work further with CoSA. And I'm sure there's other groups within CoSA that are also looking to, Joy. I don't want to undercut them.
Yes, we just generally need volunteers through and through. I think that, so Jamie has just assumed her presidency, which I'm very excited about. And we just had our first post annual board meeting yesterday, and there's a really good energy that is coming out of this. And I feel like we'll be seeing some really positive changes and shifts as we embrace the full breadth of the CoSA community. And we're really trying to think of how to engage everybody with clearly articulated goals, and trying to set up volunteer opportunities for success, and looking for ways that we can do the big work that CoSA has done since its inception, like 20 years ago, by really getting everybody into these conversations and starting to do the work that's needed to be done. Like, I mean, Josh, the fact, like, you're just selling Siri here. I can't do this work alone. And that's what I keep telling the board, is that this is your association, and I am leading you towards the things that you want to do. So I'm glad to have you all along for the ride. And yes, Alan is seeking a Siri co-chair. This has been a position that's been open for a while. And if anybody is interested in that, it's really a dynamic time to join this program work that's being done. We'll be looking really strategically at the future of Siri, trying to figure out is it still an initiative, or is this truly a program that is part of our ecosystem of CoSA. I think that there's a lot of really exciting things on the horizon.
Absolutely. Plenty of spaces and opportunities for people to join existing committees and programs, and also spark ideas for additional ones. Well, I don't, oh, there's Lisa. I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to wrap this up. Or
No, but you can turn it over to me and I'll
turn it over to Lisa.
Hey, Becky, can we have the slides again? Thank you. So thank you guys for all of your input and your comments today. I think that's one of the best things about CoSA, is our ability to share. And if you can get us together, I don't think you can shut us up as a group. So I think this is really good, and I'm glad to see so many people participating. So if you enjoyed today's webinar, we have several coming up. Next month will actually be our advocacy webinar. We're going to talk about the advocacy on the Hill, people's impressions, and then some state work that's being done, so that we can start sharing success stories and hopefully getting some of your input on how that works. So that's coming up in September, as well as October is our State Archives Spotlight. This has kind of been a tradition now for a few years. October is Archives Month, and so we highlight the archives. And so this year we're excited to have Pennsylvania, who has a brand new archives building, and then Jim in American Samoa is going to share his work with us as well. Now, we did move the time back to 3:30. That's to accommodate for Jim a little bit. It's not quite so early in his morning. So definitely sign up for those webinars. Next slide, Becky. And of course, we can't forget our Siri webinars. Josh mentioned October's Electronic Records Day, but we also have one in September called Approaches to Electronic Records Transfers. Again, great resources come in. And as we said, if you're interested in these committees, we can always use more members planning and putting together these programs. Next. We also have shop talks. So here's another good way to reach out to our sponsors who are vendors. They want to talk to you. They want to share what they're doing. So we have one coming up in September with Family Search, and then one in November with Preservica. So we don't have their topics yet, but we'll get them soon. But sign up, because they're almost always a very interesting take, and they are not a sales pitch. So we hope to see you at a shop talk as well. Next slide. Of course, you guys know the thousands of ways to contact us. Reach out, stay in communication. Next slide. And we could not do any of this work without the help of our sponsors and our grants. So thank everyone for that. And with that, we want to thank you all for joining us today for this CoSA member webinar. I believe there'll be an evaluation, and please do fill it out, just because it really does help Education Committee as they're looking at how did it go, what did we like, what did you not like, and if you have suggestions for the future. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us today for the CoSA member webinar, and we'll see you again next time at a CoSA webinar. Have a great week.